Friends, Romans, countrymen, howdy y'all. My name is Rory, I'm a writer, a zine maker, and an amateur gardener, and this video is going to walk you through 4 months in the life of my garden. April, May, June, and July. Lately, I've become really interested in wildcrafting, which is the practice of making crafts from natural materials, so I thought it would be fun to attempt some crafts using plants grown in my own garden. In this video, I do a bit of foraging, plenty of gardening, and I also dye fabric using natural dye made from beets that I grew in the spring. I hope you enjoy the video. This is my first foray into the world of foraging, or anything adjacent to that, so I did learn a lot in this process, and I hope you will too. Without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so these are my beet beds, and as you can see, the beets are very, very big, which is really exciting and is very encouraging to me. However, these nightshades are also really big, because I said I was gonna weed this bed and I haven't yet. And you can really see the effects of that, like in all of these cinder blocks here, there's stuff growing. What I like about the cinder blocks is that it does, like, these do keep these weeds from getting into the bed mostly, not always, but mostly. But it's also, it makes it difficult to like see what's going on. So today I'm gonna be weeding all of these, just making a little bit of extra room. And then here's what's going on with the melons. So there are two types of watermelons growing here. And as you can see, they're growing quite nicely. They are growing, I would say, a lot slower than the melons I planted last summer. Last summer I planted honeydew, and those grew so fast and they flowered really fast, and these are taking a little bit longer. So I'm thinking maybe I should have planted, like, I don't know, earlier. But I planted as soon as I knew we weren't going to keep getting frost, and the cold weather has lasted much longer than usual this year, so I'm not really sure if anything different could have been done here. But that's where we're standing with the watermelons. Hi there. So there's a lot of ambient noise outside right now. Like that. So I don't know if any of this audio footage will be usable, but I'm on my way to forage for some Johnson grass because I have some crafts that I'm interested in making with it. It's a pretty nice day out today. It's, I think, like low 80s, which for my neck of the woods in late April is pretty good. So I'm gonna go out and see what I can find.
I'm currently trying to develop my identification skills a little bit better. Like, I want to be better at recognizing and identifying local plants versus invasive species versus this versus that. Partly for crafting, but partly just because I think it's stuff that everyone should know, and I really want to be able to have that knowledge. I think it's just really useful. But right now I've been using a particular guide, like a guidebook app, and just to give an example of why I think really knowing your stuff matters so much. So there's loads of this plant where I live, and my guidebook, my guidebook app has just identified it as common hedge parsley. But when I looked up what this was based on just like looking at other guidebooks and sort of like inputting a description of this plant, I was told that it might actually be a type of hemlock, which is super poisonous. And so, you know, it's really important to not rely on just one guide. You really need to find multiple guides and cross-reference them and that kind of thing, because is this hemlock or is this common parsley? It kind of matters. If one of them is mega poisonous and the other isn't, that kind of matters. So just sort of as a fun example of ways that things can go wrong while foraging. Always forage responsibly, always wildcraft responsibly. Make sure that you really know what you're picking. So I came out to the beet patch to do some more weeding. As you can see, these nightshades grow really, really fast here. So I came out to take all these out of the ground, like this. And as I was doing so, I noticed that my beet bulbs have begun growing out of the ground. Like they're growing above. Let me get that in focus. Let's see. Let's get another one. Yeah, so, yeah, you can see right there, they're starting to push up out of the ground. Now, I've never grown beets before, but I Googled it, and apparently this means they're ready to be harvested, or, like, will be ready soon. So I think I'm going to pull at least some of them out of the ground, just to sort of see where we're at. There we go, finally focused. And I'll report back on that. Mosquitoes biting me. Okay, so this is the moment of truth. So I'm just gonna take a firm hand here and pull this one up. Ooh. All right. It's honestly pretty small, but like first try, I grew that and it's big enough to eat. So Let's fucking go. I've actually got like a rat king here, but instead of being rats, it's made up of beets. I can't get this apart. They're totally connected to one another. So yeah, a beet king. Okay, so I'm leaving like a couple of the really small ones in the ground just to like experiment and see if they grow any bigger if I leave them in for longer. But it was really hard to keep most of the little ones in the ground because when I pull like the biggish ones up, they pull a bunch of little ones up with them. And I'm very much aware that this problem is because I planted them way too close together, I think. So, yeah, you live some, you learn some. Look at my beet harvest. This is like a lot of beets. Pretty proud of this, even though mistakes were made. Tucking in the last of them here. I'm keeping the greens. A couple of them are a little shriveled and wilted, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this inside and cut off the wilted ones and basically like wash them and chop them up and stuff, because I've read that you can put them in salads and beet greens are like really tasty. Look at that. Look how big that is. Wait, let me zoom out. Zoomed way too far out. But yeah, look at this. Ooh, big boy. Got so excited pulling up the beets and finally harvesting them that I almost forgot to water the melon patch. This is what the melons look like right now. I say melons, these are melon plants, but obviously like we don't have any actual melons yet, but they have started flowering. The buds are closed right now, but you can see there's like a lot of little yellow buds here. This is a really good sign because it means there's now a possibility to have melons, because if these little guys are pollinated, then we'll have some plants starting. So yeah, I really need to weed this bed super badly. I don't think I'm gonna do it tonight because I'm lazy and I just gave myself like 15 mosquito bites. So that's where we're at. So this is my setup. Basically I just had this big pile of beets on this side. I went through them. I pulled off all of like the leaves and the dead stuff, which all ended up in this basket here because it was already covered in dirt, because this is the basket that I used to harvest them. And as you can see, most of this is like withered greens, stuff that's like really wilted or dried up that we can't use in the kitchen at all. So it's just gonna get composted. So yeah, basically that stuff got chopped off. I tried to get as much dirt off as I can. This is the beet pile. So all of these are gonna end up in a soup or a salad or a stew or something of that nature. I'm really excited. Look how big some of them got. I know this is not close to grocery store size, but like first try, I'm feeling pretty good, pretty proud. And then these are all of the greens. So these are gonna get washed and are going to get turned into a delicious salad. And I just love like all of the colors here, like the incredible greens and the super, super vibrant like purples. Really beautiful. So yeah. With these, I think we're probably going to, I don't know. These are the smallest ones, and like some of the bigger, smaller ones can probably be eaten. Like they're not super big, size of a grape maybe, but like you can eat a grape. So I might eat these, or I might not. I might decide to just like chuck them in the compost. I'm not sure, but there we have it. Okay, so these are all the beets. I've chopped them up. My hand is thoroughly beet dyed. As you can see, I got kind of lazy near the end, so I stopped, like with the really little ones, I stopped peeling them because they were just so small that I was afraid I was gonna cut my hand by trying to peel these. So some of the skins are still on for the little ones, and also I stopped like dicing them because I got really lazy near the end, so some of them are just like these little coins, but this is a lot of beet. Like, I don't know if you can see, but this pot is pretty big, so I think that I have plenty of dye fodder. Okay, so these are my scrap fabrics. As you can see, there's not a lot of them. I'm not dyeing like huge chunks of fabric today, just kind of little scraps that I've had left over from past projects. What I do know is, I'm out of breath, I just ran upstairs. What I do know is these are all natural fabrics. They're not like polyester or synthetic or anything, which is important for the dyeing process because it's super hard to dye anything on plastic, basically. Even if you're using like a chemical dyeing process, not a natural dyeing process, it's still really hard to get dye to take on plastic. So I do know that these are either 100% cotton, or I think maybe some of them are like very, very high blend cotton. They should be very high in natural fibers. So there's this one, which you can see is just like a generic white. And then, I broke a nail. That's kind of gross, sorry. These are like a generic white. And then this one is like, I don't know if you can really see that on camera, but it's a very pale yellow. So this one is technically already dyed. I don't know what it was dyed with. But yeah, so I'm gonna try making this pink or red, or, you know, however these guys turn out. I've got two pots here. That's because this one is for actually making the dye, and then this one is for the mordant. Okay, so I've just used this scooper tool to scoop out pretty much all of the beets. I'm sure there's like little bits in there that you can see, but for the most part it should be liquid. This is a really good step because obviously if you're dyeing clothes, you don't want there to be like beet pulp in your clothes, but also you can still eat those beets, so it's kind of a waste of food to just like chuck them in the dye and that's it. So we're now going to mix this dye into the fixative, which is a combination of vinegar and water in this case, and we'll leave that for a bit and see how it turns out. Okay, so all of these scraps of fabric have sat in the dye pot overnight, so not quite 24 hours, but definitely at least 12. And they've been sitting there, and now the stage that we're at is that they sit out in the sun so that the sun can like bake the dye into them. I noticed that some people on YouTube who have done similar recipes were basically like rinsing the dye out before they did this step. So I tried it on one piece of fabric and the dye rinsed almost completely out. So I didn't do that on the others. And we're gonna see how these pieces of fabric fare after they've kind of baked in the sun for a while. I'm gonna weigh these down because they really want to fly away in the wind, especially like once they dry. So I'll check back in once they've dried up a bit. Yeah, so this doesn't really show up very well on camera, but there is like a light pink color to these scraps of fabric. This is the one that I washed, so hey man, can you chill out? He said, why are you doing crafts when you could be paying attention to me? So yeah, this is the one that I like rinsed out before drying it, and this is one of the ones that I did not rinse out, and you can really see that now that color, that light pink color, is really baked into the fabric. Oh, hi. I don't know, I'm like, this is fine. I was hoping for something a little brighter. Oh. Ah.
Okay, so here's a little debrief. As I was saying, I had hoped the beet dyed fabric would turn out a bit more vibrant, but I am happy with this light pink color. I think it's really pretty and earthy, and I'm excited to use these fabric samples to make some line-a-cut jacket patches, probably sometime in the future. That said, I definitely think that if I replicate this process again, I'm going to actually get a proper mordant. A mordant is a chemical fixative used in the dyeing process, and I didn't use a real mordant today because it's actually really hard to find in brick and mortar stores. You pretty much have to order your mordant online, so that's what I'm gonna do. For today's dyeing process, I used a vinegar water solution, which is a fixative, but it's not generally considered a proper mordant because it's pretty weak. I'll also add that a side effect of using vinegar is that your fabric will come out smelling like vinegar, and I like the smell of vinegar. I don't think it's a bad smell, but it's certainly a potent one, so bear that in mind if you decide to replicate this process. For all those reasons, I'm going to be using a real chemical mordant the next time I try using beets to dye fabric, which I do want to try again in the future. Overall, I feel like the gardening part of this video was my greatest success. I'm really happy with how juicy and delicious the beets were, and the beet greens were also super tasty. I think my least successful craft was definitely the God's Eye I tried to make out of Johnson grass. Here's how far I got. This particular grass ended up being quite stiff and not particularly flexible, and the stem running up the middle was pretty hard to work with, so I ended up having to cut it out of each individual blade of grass, which was really annoying. Foraging in my neck of the woods is tricky because I found that the vast majority of foraging resources online are geared specifically towards foragers in the UK and Europe. There's a comparative lack of foraging resources for communities based in the American Southwest, so I'm essentially experimenting here. I really want to find local native plants that I can use in crafting, which means there will be a lot of trial and error, but I'm going to keep at it. I've seen a lot of other foragers online prep their materials by drying them and then rehydrating them, so that's what I'm going to try with this Johnson grass here. As you can see, it's completely dry right now, and before I attempt to use it again, I'm going to rehydrate it to see if that makes it easier to work with. I'll probably update you on my garden and crafting projects in my summer vlog, which will maybe be out in a couple months. I can never really tell or say for sure, but I would say give it a couple months at least, because the melons are going to be growing probably until early November at the very least. In the meantime, if y'all have any tips, tricks, questions, advice, any of that, feel free to leave a comment, and I'll catch you on the flip side.